It is, it's incredibly easy to just completely forget that the internet is a physical thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, when you type a prompt into an AI chatbot, like maybe you're asking it to write a macro for a spreadsheet or generate a recipe based on, whatever is left in your fridge,
Right.
or like create a photorealistic image of an astronaut riding a horse on Mars. The whole experience just feels entirely, I don't know, weightless.
Yeah. Weightless is a good word for it. It feels completely detached from reality.
Exactly. It's just pixels appearing on a piece of glass in your hand. You hit enter, and instantaneously, an answer just seems to like materialize right out of the ether.
From a cloud.
Right, the magical cloud. But what we want to talk about today is what is the actual physical weight of that digital magic?
It is a really profound disconnect, I think, because the design of these interfaces is just, well, it's intentionally frictionless, right? We are meant to feel like we are interacting with pure abstract logic, just a disembodied intelligence floating somewhere above us. But the reality is that every single query, like every single time you hit that send button, you're pulling a lever that is tethered to a massive, heavy, highly industrial infrastructure, and it's spread across the entire globe.
So today, we are focusing on completely stripping away that fluffy cloud metaphor. We are diving deep into a really comprehensive May 2025 report from Greenpeace.
Researched and compiled by the Yoko Institute. Yeah.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to look at the hard physical realities of artificial intelligence. We're going to examine the staggering amounts of energy it consumes, the billions of liters of water it evaporates, the land it occupies, and just the sheer mountains of physical waste it leaves behind.
Because the foundational premise here is that while AI is, undeniably a transformative technology with just vast capabilities, we are currently making a blind trade.
A completely blind trade.
Yeah. We are exchanging massive, really irreplaceable environmental resources for this technological progress, and we're doing it largely without actually measuring the cost.
Which is terrifying when you think about it.
It is. The technology sector is moving at a breakneck, unprecedented speed, and society at large, as well as our regulatory frameworks, honestly, is just totally failing to account for the true ecological toll of what is essentially a new industrial revolution.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because to understand what AI is actually consuming, we first have to, redefine what it physically is.
Right.
Because reading through this Greenpeace report, the most significant paradigm shift for me was the realization that we are no longer talking about software development. Not in the traditional sense, anyway. We are talking about heavy, resource-intensive industry.
And that framing is crucial. If you look back at the tech boom of the 90s and the 2000s, the primary engine of growth was, well, writing smarter code.
Yeah, basically just being clever with software.
Exactly. It was about elegant algorithms, better compression, and optimizing software so it could run on relatively standard consumer hardware.
Right.
Or just traditional web servers.
Right.
But the current era of artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI and these large language models, it operates on a fundamentally different principle. It is a total brute force approach to computing.
Because instead of just programming a computer to follow a set of logical rules, like an incredibly complex flowchart, basically, you are training a neural network.
Right.
And doing that requires a massive structural shift in the hardware itself. We are moving away from traditional CPUs or central processing units to GPUs, which are graphics processing units.
Right. Which fundamentally changes the math.
Yeah. To give you an analogy, if a traditional CPU is like an incredibly fast, highly skilled mathematician who can solve one complex equation at a time at lightning speed,
a GPU is quite different.
a GPU is like a stadium filled with thousands of middle school math students.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. They aren't individually as fast as the genius mathematician, but they can solve tens of thousands of simpler equations simultaneously. And training an AI model is entirely about doing billions of those simple calculations, these matrix multiplications in parallel.
And the scale of that mathematical operation is exactly what drives the physical footprint. The report highlights the exponential growth of these models. Let's look at 2019. A model like GPT-2, which felt revolutionary at the time.
Oh, it was mind-blowing back then.
Right. It had 1.5 billion parameters.
Okay, 1.5 billion.
But by early 2025, models like Llama 4 are operating with 2 trillion parameters.
Yeah.
The computational effort required just to train these models is basically doubling approximately every 5 months.
Great, every 5 months.
Every 5 months.
That is, I mean, that's just an exponential curve that is violently bending the physical supply chain. To perform those massive parallel calculations, you need racks upon racks upon racks of these highly specialized GPUs. And these chips are incredibly dense. They pull in an immense amount of electrical current, and because they are running continuous, really heavy workloads, they run incredibly hot.
So the titans of the tech world, we're talking Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple, and Meta, they aren't just upgrading their software right now. They are engaged in a multi-hundred-billion-dollar arms race
Yeah.
to build the physical factories that house these chips.
Right, they're constructing what the industry calls hyperscale data centers. And this is where the cloud metaphor just completely dies for me.
Oh, it shatters it.
Totally, because when I used to hear data center, I pictured maybe like a generic corporate office park building with some loud server racks on the ground floor, but the report details facilities that are almost beyond comprehension in scale.
Oh, yeah.
We are talking about complexes that take up literal square kilometers of land, floor spaces of up to 4 million square meters.
And what's fascinating here is the power density of these facilities. You mentioned the old data centers. A traditional data center hosting websites and email servers might have an electrical capacity of a few megawatts.
Okay.
But the report notes that these new AI-specific hyperscale facilities, they have electrical connection capacities of over 100 megawatts.
Wow.
And there are some planned sites targeting a full gigawatt,
A gigawatt.
1,000 megawatts.
1,000 megawatt facility. I mean, to put that in perspective for you, a single nuclear reactor core typically produces about 1,000 megawatts.
Exactly.
Or like a massive multi-unit coal-fired power plant. You are talking about dedicating the entire output of a heavy power plant to a single building filled with microchips.
Right. On the consumption side, a 1,000-megawatt data center draws the same amount of continuous electricity as a European city of roughly 1 million inhabitants.
One building.
One single industrial complex rivaling the energy footprint of a major metropolis. The companies profiting most in this new era are not necessarily the ones with the most clever chatbot interface.
No, of course not.
They are the companies that successfully execute this modern-day land grab for physical compute infrastructure.
It's like moving from, I don't know, artisanal workshops in the 18th century directly into the construction of massive smoke-belching steel mills in the 19th century.
That's exactly what it is.
We are laying down the heavy industrial tracks for a new economy. And because of this massive build-out, the AI share of total global data center electricity consumption is fundamentally shifting.
And numbers are staggering.
Yeah, the report projects that specialized AI hardware will grow from an estimated 14% of all global data center electricity in 2023
Which is already a lot.
to a staggering 47% by 2030.
Because the traditional internet-like streaming video, social media feeds, cloud storage for your photos, it isn't shrinking, it's still growing.
Right.
But the infrastructure dedicated purely to AI is expanding so rapidly that in just a few years it will rival the energy consumption of all other internet activities combined.
So if we are basically building the equivalent of digital steel mills, those mills require an astronomical amount of fuel.
They do.
The transition from physical footprint to energy consumption is like the next major focus of the Oko Institute's research. So let's look at the sheer avalanche of energy this requires and what it is actively doing to local power grids around the world.
Right, so the report establishes a baseline using data from the International Energy Agency. In 2023, global data centers consumed roughly 487 terawatt-hours of electricity.
And just for context, a terawatt hour is a billion kilowatt hours. If you look at your home electric bill, you probably use, what, a few hundred kilowatt hours a month?
Yeah, exactly.
So 487 billion of those.
And with a projected average compound annual growth rate of 16%, that baseline of 487 terawatt-hours in 2023 is expected to almost triple.
Triple.
To 1,389 terawatt-hours by 2030.
Tripling global consumption for a single sector in just 7 years? I mean, that's insane.
And the breakdown of that growth is the truly alarming part. AI-specific electricity consumption is projected to explode from 50 terawatt-hours in 2023 to 554 terawatt-hours in 2030.
Wow.
That is an 11-fold increase in 7 years.
And here is the major problem with trying to absorb an 11-fold increase in electrical demand. Power grids are incredibly fragile, finely balanced machines.
Yes, they are.
A grid isn't just a big battery that you can just, plug anything into whenever you want. Grid operators have to match the supply of electricity being generated at the power plant with the exact demand of consumers, millisecond by millisecond.
And if they don't?
Right, if demand spikes too high above supply, the frequency of the grid drops. And if it drops too far, the entire system physically trips and you get a blackout.
It cascades.
Yeah. So when you drop a 100-megawatt hyperscale data center into a local grid, you are introducing a massive, inflexible block of constant demand. And the report points out that this burden isn't evenly distributed globally. It is heavily concentrated in specific geographic hubs.
Which makes it so much worse for those local areas. If the load were distributed evenly across the globe, national infrastructure might actually be able to gradually upgrade transmission lines and, build out sufficient generation capacity.
Spread the burden.
Right. But the tech industry clusters its infrastructure. They do it for reasons of network latency, tax incentives, and existing fiber optic backbones.
So they all flock to the same places.
Yes. The report specifically highlights the U.S. state of Virginia.
Oh, Virginia.
Data centers already account for 26% of all electricity consumption in the entire state.
Over a quarter of the power generated for millions of residents, factories, hospitals, and schools in Virginia goes straight to server farms.
It's wild. But the situation in Europe is even more acute. Look at Ireland. Nationally, data centers consume 21% of their electricity.
Which is huge on its own.
But in the capital city of Dublin, it is an astonishing 79%.
So if you live in Dublin and you want to, I don't know, run your washing machine, or the local bakery turns on its ovens in the morning, or the streetlights come on at night, all of actual physical human life in that major European capital is fighting for the remaining 21% of the power grid's capacity.
That's the reality.
That sounds less like a technological boom and more like a systemic vulnerability. Are we heading toward a future where rolling blackouts just become the norm so an AI can instantaneously summarize a PDF?
It is already creating a genuine crisis for grid operators. I mean, data centers historically operate on a business model that demands 247 uninterrupted power.
Right, they never turn off.
Exactly. They need to run those incredibly expensive GPUs around the clock to maximize the return on their capital investment. But local municipal grids simply weren't designed to support this level of concentrated, unyielding baseload demand.
They just physically can't handle it.
In Ireland, the strain has reached a breaking point where the government has actually intervened. They're legally mandating that new data centers must build their own massive on-site power plants.
Wait, really?
Yes, usually natural gas backup generators, so they can operate off the grid when capacity is tight.
They're essentially telling the tech companies, you are too big for our public infrastructure. Bring your own power plant.
That's exactly it. Furthermore, grid operators are now securing unprecedented legal permission to actively throttle power to data centers.
Oh, wow.
This means if a cold snap hits and public heating demand spikes, the grid operator can actually force the data center to power down or at least severely reduce its usage to protect the public supply.
So the era of the tech industry treating local grids as an infinite on-demand resource has basically hit a hard physical limit.
It definitely has.
Which naturally leads us to ask, if we are pulling all this power, where is the underlying energy actually coming from?
Right.
Because you can't just manifest electricity out of thin air. It has to be generated. And that generation creates physical byproducts. This brings us to what the Greenpeace report calls the carbon footprint paradox.
And the emissions data here is very sobering. The report estimates that global greenhouse gas emissions from data centers will rise from 212 million tons in 2023 to 355 million tons in 2030.
That's a huge jump.
And AI-specific emissions alone are projected to increase almost six-fold, from 29 million tons to 166 million tons.
And what really stands out to me about those projections is that the Oko Institute actually factored in the greening of the grid.
Yes, they did.
They built their model assuming that emission factors per kilowatt hour will steadily decline as countries replace coal plants with more solar and wind, aiming for, global zero carbon by 2040. So even while the global power supply is actively getting cleaner, the sheer volume of AI's new energy appetite is so gluttonous that absolute emissions are still going to skyrocket.
Exactly. The growth is vastly outpacing the cleanup.
That's wild.
The efficiency gains and the transition to renewables on the macro level are being completely overwhelmed by the micro-level explosion in infrastructure build-out.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you look at the public-facing PR of these companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta,
Oh, the PR is amazing.
they all have incredibly slick sustainability reports. They are signatories to the EU Climate Neutral Data Center Pact. They have made highly publicized, aggressive pledges to be completely climate neutral or run on 100% carbon-free energy by 2030.
Right.
Yet, this independent Greenpeace report, and honestly, if you read the fine print, their own recent internal sustainability disclosures show their absolute greenhouse gas emissions are actively increasing year over year.
Yep.
So how do you legally reconcile a public claim of being 100% renewable with a balance sheet that shows your actual carbon footprint is growing by the megaton?
It all comes down to a very clever, deeply flawed, and highly abstracted system of carbon accounting.
Okay, lay it on me.
Specifically, it revolves around how companies report what are known as Scope 2 emissions.
Scope 2.
Right. So Scope 1 emissions are direct, like the exhaust from a diesel generator you physically own. Scope 2 emissions are the indirect greenhouse gases created by the electricity you purchase from the grid.
Got it.
Now, ideally, a tech company would build a massive solar farm right next to its data center, plug the servers directly into the solar panels, and run on clean power.
Right, but the sun goes down, and wind turbines stop spinning when the weather changes, and as we just discussed, AI data centers demand a massive inflexible baseline of power 24 hours a day. They don't sleep.
That is the core conflict.
Yeah.
Because they require that inflexible 24/47 power at night or during a wind lull. They just pull power from whatever is available on the local grid.
Which is usually fossil fuels.
Exactly. If that data center happens to be in Virginia, where the grid still relies heavily on fossil fuels, that data center is physically being powered by local natural gas or coal-fired power plants overnight.
So they are physically burning fossil fuels,
Yes.
but they still slap a 100% renewable badge on their website. How are they legally doing that?
Through a mechanism called spatial and temporal decoupling, utilizing renewable energy certificates, or RECs.
Ari.
The system allows a company to purchase a certificate representing a megawatt hour of clean energy generated somewhere else at some other time.
Huh.
So Microsoft or Amazon might purchase RECs from a hydroelectric dam in Norway or a sprawling wind farm in Texas. They then use those paper certificates to mathematically offset the electricity they pulled from the coal plant in Virginia.
Mathematically.
Right. As long as the total annual volume of certificates matches their total annual volume of consumption, they legally declare their operations 100% renewable.
I want to use an analogy here to make sure we really understand how absurd this is. Think of the power grid like a massive municipal water system.
Okay.
You have a pipe drawing water out of the system in Virginia to drink. Because it's nighttime, the only water available in the local Virginia reservoir is muddy, untreated water.
Right.
So you drink the muddy water, but you pay a guy in Norway to pour a gallon of crystal clear, pure spring water into the Norwegian water system.
And then you tell the public.
And then you tell the public, I only drink pure spring water. The physical reality is that you drank the mud, and your local environment had to process that mud.
That is a perfect analogy, because the atmosphere operates on physical reality, not accounting ledgers. The atmosphere only responds to the physical molecules of carbon dioxide being emitted in Virginia.
Right, the atmosphere doesn't care about a piece of paper from Norway.
Exactly. The fatal flaw of the REC system is that because AI demands continuous, inflexible power, it is actively forcing the extended operation of highly polluting fossil fuel plants.
Because the local utility has to keep that coal plant running through the night because the data center is demanding 100 megawatts.
And the paper offsets from Norway do absolutely nothing to stop the physical combustion of coal happening in Virginia. As the Greenpeace report emphasizes, this additional rigid consumption is essentially generated by running climate-damaging power plants over longer periods. The paper offsets just provide an illusion of sustainability while masking real-world atmospheric harm.
And the tech giants aren't oblivious to this, right? They are highly resourced organizations, and they are starting to realize that regulators, environmental groups, and honestly just the public are seeing right through this Scope 2 paper trick.
Oh, they definitely know.
They know their 2047 demand profile fundamentally clashes with the fluctuating nature of solar and wind power. And they're increasingly desperate to find a way to actually meet those 2030 clean energy pledges without relying on these accounting loopholes. So according to the report, they are making a massive, unprecedented, and deeply controversial pivot.
They are trying to revive the nuclear power industry,
Which is just wild.
It represents one of the most significant and unexpected shifts in the global energy landscape over the past year. Recognizing that intermittent renewables cannot provide the constant, unyielding baseload power their hyperscale facilities require, big tech is stepping in to finance and resurrect nuclear fission.
It is wild to read the specifics of the deals being signed right now. Like, Microsoft is actively funding the reopening of a reactor at the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Let me repeat that for everyone. 3 Mile Island, the site of the most notorious commercial nuclear accident in U.S. history.
It's hard to believe.
They are restarting a dormant reactor specifically to feed Microsoft's data centers. Meanwhile, Amazon and Meta are pouring billions of dollars into developing small modular reactors, or SMRs.
And Google.
Yeah, Google is backing a startup called Kairos Power, which is attempting to build future mini reactors cooled by liquid salt rather than water.
The narrative the tech industry is heavily promoting here is that nuclear is the ultimate clean, firm power source. It provides that essential 24/7 baseload without emitting carbon dioxide during the fission process.
Right, that's their angle.
However, the Greenpeace report strongly pushes back against this completely sanitized framing, detailing immense, unresolved life cycle risks and massive financial hurdles that the tech companies are conveniently minimizing.
Well, before we get into the life cycle risks, I just have to state how jarring this feels. Instead of adapting the technology, like maybe building better battery storage for solar power, or, I don't know, designing AI models that can pause training when the wind isn't blowing.
Right, actually changing their behavior.
Yeah. Instead of that, we're literally attempting to revive 1970s nuclear technology, reopen sites associated with historical meltdowns, and fund experimental mini reactors all, just so we can generate more AI chatbots at a faster rate. That feels like a colossal misallocation of societal risk. We are basically bending the physical world to accommodate a software product.
This raises an important question regarding who ultimately bears the risk of this massive infrastructure pivot. The tech companies are exploiting a narrow definition by classifying nuclear energy strictly as clean based solely on the moment of electricity generation.
Right.
But they are willfully ignoring the broader industrial life cycle. Nuclear energy is not actually zero carbon when evaluated from cradle to grave.
Because you don't just magically manifest a working nuclear reactor.
No, you don't. The report details that conventional large-scale nuclear power plants have an emission factor of approximately 25 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour.
Okay, 25 kilograms.
And this footprint is generated by the massive energy input required to mine uranium ore, the highly complex and energy-intensive refining and enrichment process to create nuclear fuel, and the immense carbon-heavy construction process.
Oh, right, the concrete.
Building a nuclear containment vessel requires astronomical amounts of poured concrete and forged steel, both of which are highly carbon-intensive to produce.
Wow.
For context, the life cycle emissions of offshore wind are around 10 kilograms per megawatt hour, and hydropower is roughly 3 kilograms.
So 25 for nuclear versus 10 for wind and 3 for hydro.
Exactly. So while nuclear is obviously lower than coal, it is significantly more carbon-heavy than actual renewable sources.
And that is just the carbon accounting. We haven't even touched the actual defining characteristic of nuclear power, the radiation.
Right. We are talking about the continuous production of highly radioactive spent fuel. To date, despite decades of commercial nuclear operation, there is not a single permanent operational deep geological disposal site in the world that can safely store high-level nuclear waste for the hundreds of thousands of years required for it to become safe.
Not a single one.
By expanding nuclear power for AI, we are creating a toxic mortgage on the future. We are generating waste that countless future generations will have to secure and manage simply to power data centers for a few decades today.
And then there's the catastrophic risk. The report explicitly notes the historical context of Chernobyl and Fukushima. The potential damage from a severe nuclear accident is so vast, so economically devastating that it is fundamentally uninsurable in the private market.
That is a critical economic point. No insurance company in the world will underwrite the full catastrophic liability of a nuclear power plant.
None of them.
None. The industry relies on government legislation, like the Price-Anderson Act in the U.S., which legally caps the liability of the nuclear operators. If a catastrophe exceeds that cap, the financial ruin, the environmental devastation, and the public health crisis fall entirely on the public, the taxpayers, and the local communities.
So the tech giants get the privatized profits of a booming AI sector, while the public is forced to socialize the uninsurable radioactive risks.
That's the reality of the economics, yes.
And the irony is, it's not even a cheap solution. The report states that electricity from nuclear power is expected to cost over $120 per megawatt hour.
It's incredibly expensive.
Meanwhile, combining solar power with massive utility-scale battery storage is expected to cost between $45 and $70 per megawatt hour. So nuclear is double the price, infinitely more dangerous, creates millennia of toxic waste, but they're choosing it simply because it acts as a convenient, rigid 247 plug-in for their servers.
The ultimate critique from the UCO Institute here is that the tech industry is demanding the physical power grid conform to their inflexible operational model.
Rather than the other way around.
Exactly. Instead of adapting their data center operations to be flexible,
Yeah.
perhaps designing software that trains models heavily when the sun is shining and dials back operations at night to work in harmony with variable renewable energy, they just demand constant, unyielding power, even if it necessitates reviving the nuclear industry.
Okay, so we've covered the staggering footprint, the power grids, the carbon accounting loopholes, and this wild nuclear pivot. But there is another crucial physical element that these massive server farms require. Because when you run billions of matrix multiplications a second through dense silicon chips, you generate an incredible amount of friction.
A lot of heat.
Those chips get incredibly hot. To keep the racks from literally melting down, they have to drink.
They do.
We need to talk about the hidden thirst of AI, water consumption.
This is a vector where the environmental impact becomes intensely localized and deeply tangible. Hyperscale data centers require massive industrial-scale cooling systems. The report estimates that globally, data centers consumed roughly 175 billion liters of water in 2023.
175 billion.
By 2030, this baseline is expected to hit 664 billion liters.
664 billion liters of water.
And again, the AI-specific infrastructure is the primary driver of this acceleration. AI water consumption is projected to jump from 30 billion liters in 2023 to 338 billion liters by 2030.
That is over a tenfold increase.
In the near future, AI data centers alone will consume significantly more water than all conventional IT data centers and the entire cryptocurrency mining sector combined.
But how exactly are they utilizing this water? Because they aren't just, hosing down the server racks, obviously. We're talking about cooling systems, right?
Right. The industry utilizes a specific metric called water usage effectiveness, or WUE.
Okay.
This measures the liters of water consumed per kilowatt hour of electricity used by the facility. Now, if you build a data center in a naturally cold climate, say northern Sweden, you can rely heavily on outside air cooling.
Just open a window, basically.
Basically, yes. But tech companies build data centers everywhere, including hot, arid climates like the American Southwest or parts of Southern Europe. The most energy-efficient way to cool a massive building in a hot climate is evaporative cooling.
Which is essentially the exact same mechanism as human sweat, right?
Yes, exactly.
When you get hot, your body releases water onto your skin. As that water evaporates into a gas, it absorbs heat energy, cooling your body down. A data center does this on an industrial scale. They take the scalding hot air generated by the servers, pass it through cooling towers where it meets water, and the evaporation pulls the heat away.
The critical distinction here is what happens to that water. When water is used in a closed-loop system, it can be recycled. But in evaporative cooling, the water is transformed into vapor and vented into the atmosphere.
So it's just gone.
It's permanently consumed and removed from the local municipal watershed. While the industry average WUE is currently about 0.36 liters per kilowatt hour, the report notes that some older cooling tower setups can consume up to 4 or 5 liters of water per kilowatt hour.
Wow. So every time you ask an AI to generate a complex multi-page report or render a high-definition video from a text prompt, you have to picture a physical consequence. You are not just spinning up a hard drive somewhere. You are effectively taking a large glass of fresh, drinkable municipal water and pouring it straight down the drain, evaporating it into the sky.
That's the physical reality of the transaction.
And if you live in a drought-stricken area like parts of California, Arizona, or regions of Spain where these centers are frequently built, how would you feel about a hyperscale data center moving into your county and permanently evaporating millions of liters of your limited municipal water supply every single day?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights a profound environmental justice issue. We're extracting vital, life-sustaining water from local communities, frequently in water-scarce regions,
Yeah.
to cool servers that are processing data to generate profits for massive global corporations.
Yeah.
The local community bears the resource burden, while the economic benefit is extracted to Silicon Valley. But the Greenpeace report reveals something even more staggering about the scale of water use.
Right, this part.
The water evaporated at the data center itself. The Scope 1 direct water consumption is actually only a fraction of the total problem.
This was the part of the report that completely blew my mind. The indirect water use.
The power plants generating the massive amounts of electricity required by the data center also consume enormous quantities of water. Fossil fuel plants, natural gas plants, and especially nuclear plants all rely heavily on water to cool their massive steam turbines.
Right.
The report calculates the ratio between water lost during power generation versus water lost directly at the data center's cooling towers. If a data center is being powered by a local coal-fired plant, that coal plant loses 10 times as much water as the data center's own cooling system.
10 times. The power plant is evaporating 10 times more water than the data center itself, just to manufacture the electricity to run the data center.
And the numbers get even more extreme with renewables. Tech companies heavily favor purchasing hydroelectric power because it allows them to claim zero carbon energy.
Because there's no smokestack.
Right. But the water loss to natural evaporation from the massive surface area of a hydro dam reservoir is immense. The report calculates that the water loss associated with hydroelectric generation is 301 times greater than the direct water loss at the data center.
Wait, 301 times?
301 times.
So when a tech giant proudly declares this facility is powered by clean, green hydropower, the hidden, unstated cost is the massive, continuous evaporation of millions of liters of water from the reservoir feeding those turbines. The accounting just completely hides the physical reality.
It does. And we haven't even touched the top of the supply chain. Before server even reaches a data center, the manufacturing process of the microchips themselves is incredibly water-intensive.
To make the chip.
Yes. To fabricate these incredibly complex AI chips printing nanoscale transistors onto silicon, you need ultra-pure water to repeatedly wash the silicon wafers at multiple stages of production to prevent microscopic contamination.
Oh.
The report cites TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor giant, that physically manufactures the vast majority of NVIDIA's highly sought-after AI chips. In the year 2022 alone, TSMC withdrew 105 billion liters of water.
105 billion liters of water just to aggressively wash the silicon before it's even assembled into a server.
And because global advanced semiconductor production is hyper-concentrated in very few geographic locations, primarily Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, this places an immense, highly localized strain on their domestic water resources.
I can imagine.
During recent droughts in Taiwan, the government literally had to halt irrigation for local agriculture to ensure the semiconductor fabs had enough water to keep producing chips.
We are actively prioritizing the washing of silicon wafers for AI chatbots over irrigating crops for food production during droughts. That is just a profound reordering of societal priorities.
It's a stark choice they're making.
Okay, so we are burning astronomical amounts of energy. We are evaporating billions of liters of water. We are generating millions of tons of carbon, and we are proposing a revival of the nuclear industry.
Yeah.
But eventually, the physical servers and the specialized chips we are manufacturing become obsolete. Technology moves fast, and AI technology moves faster than anything we've ever seen. What happens to the physical boxes themselves?
This brings us to the hardware life cycle and one of the most counterintuitive economic principles in the report, the Jevons paradox.
Right. So let's examine the hardware itself first. A single standard server is a heavy, complex piece of industrial equipment.
It weighs over 15 kilograms, and it is constructed from iron, steel, non-ferrous metals, and a host of critical raw materials, including rare earth elements whose extraction processes are notoriously environmentally destructive.
And the specialized AI chips, the GPU clusters, are even larger, heavier, and more material-intensive than standard web servers.
Factor in the incredibly rapid, exponential pace of AI advancement we discussed earlier. A state-of-the-art server deployed today might be completely functionally obsolete in just 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years. That's it.
Because the newer AI models demand faster memory bandwidth and more specialized processing architectures. This rapid forced turnover is creating a looming tsunami of electronic waste. The Greenpeace report projects that up to 5 million tons of additional electronic waste will be generated globally by 2030, driven solely by the expansion of data centers and AI computing capacities.
5 million tons of toxic heavy metal-laced e-waste. But surely the tech companies are aware of this. I mean, they have thousands of brilliant engineers working around the clock to make these chips more efficient, right? Every new generation of chips announced by companies like NVIDIA claims to be vastly more energy efficient, doing more matrix multiplications per watt of electricity than the previous generation. Doesn't that continuous march of technological efficiency eventually solve the environmental problem?
This is where we run into a fundamental, unavoidable economic trap, which the report details extensively. The rebound effect, also known historically as the Jevons paradox.
I found the Jevons paradox absolutely fascinating when reading this because it feels entirely counterintuitive at first glance.
It really has.
Essentially, the paradox dictates that even if our engineers successfully design the most incredibly energy-efficient AI chip imaginable, that engineering triumph might actually make the total environmental degradation worse.
That is precisely the mechanism of the paradox. It is named after William Stanley Jevons, a 19th century English economist.
Okay.
He observed a curious phenomenon during the Industrial Revolution regarding coal consumption. When engineers like James Watt developed vastly more efficient steam engines that required significantly less coal to do the same amount of mechanical work, everyone assumed total coal consumption would drop.
Which makes logical sense. If it's more efficient, you need less fuel.
But Jevons observed the exact opposite. Coal consumption exploded.
Because the massive increase in efficiency made steam power dramatically cheaper and more profitable to operate.
Exactly.
And when something becomes cheap and profitable, industries find hundreds of new ways to implement it. They stopped just pumping water out of mines and started building steam-powered trains, ships, and textile mills.
The exact same economic law applies to AI compute. If NVIDIA or Google creates a new TPU or GPU that is twice as energy efficient at processing an AI query, the immediate financial cost of running that query drops significantly.
Right.
When the cost of intelligence drops to near zero, tech companies are incentivized to integrate AI into absolutely everything. Instead of reserving immense computational power for complex, high-value tasks like modeling protein folding for medical research or analyzing climate data, we embed it into everyday trivialities.
We use a multi-million-dollar supercomputer cluster to automatically summarize a 3-line email from our boss.
Yes.
We use it to generate endless, slightly different variations of a graphic for a social media post. We use it to power the dialogue of non-player characters in video games.
Exactly. The efficiency gains at the microchip level are entirely wiped out, and then vastly exceeded by the sheer explosion in ubiquitous usage at the macro level.
So efficiency doesn't save us.
The rebound effect guarantees that efficiency alone cannot save us. It merely accelerates the scale of deployment.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the report highlights the indirect, systemic effects of AI application.
What do you mean by indirect?
Well, if you deploy a highly efficient AI system to optimize the global supply chain for a fast fashion conglomerate, enabling them to manufacture, ship, and sell millions of additional cheap, disposable garments at a lower margin.
Oh, I see.
The true environmental harm of that AI is not the electricity it consumed to run its optimization algorithms.
It's the mountain of physical textile waste, the microplastics in the ocean, and the shipping emissions it actively facilitated.
Exactly. Or consider the example the Greenpeace report specifically cites, the deployment of bespoke AI applications to lower the cost and increase the strike rate of offshore oil and gas extraction. If AI makes it significantly cheaper and easier for fossil fuel companies to locate and extract new oil reserves, the indirect atmospheric harm caused by the AI vastly outweighs whatever direct carbon footprint the servers generated. You cannot decouple the environmental cost of the technology from the environmental cost of its application.
Okay, this has been an incredibly heavy dive. We have audited the massive concrete footprint, the strain on fragile power grids, the accounting illusions of the carbon ledgers, the terrifying pivot to uninsurable nuclear risk, the evaporation of hundreds of billions of liters of water, the geopolitics of ultra-pure water in Taiwan, the mountains of toxic e-waste, and the inescapable economic trap of the Jevons paradox.
It's a lot to take in.
It feels like we are strapped to a runaway freight train. But the Greenpeace report doesn't just list the catastrophes, it pivots toward actionable, systemic solutions. How do we actually course-correct this without simply unplugging the server farms and returning to physical card catalogs?
The report outlines a very clear, rigorous 5-point framework for sustainable AI. It It requires a fundamental, legally mandated shift from optimizing purely for speed and shareholder profit to optimizing for ecological survival.
Because voluntary pledges clearly aren't working.
Voluntary corporate pledges have failed. Regulatory intervention is required.
Let's break down the framework. Point 1, 100% additional renewable energy. What does the additional part mean?
This point directly targets the Scope 2 accounting loophole and the REC market we discussed earlier. Tech companies can no longer be permitted to simply purchase paper certificates to claim they are green while actively pulling fossil fuels from the local grid at night.
Okay.
The rule of additionality requires that if an AI company wants to build a new 100-megawatt data center, they must physically finance and construct 100 megawatts of new, additional renewable energy capacity.
Like actually building a new solar farm.
Exactly. Like a new solar array, complete with utility-scale battery storage to power their facility directly. They must actively add generation capacity to the grid, rather than siphoning off existing public resources.
Build the power you use. It's elegantly simple and forces them to bear the true cost of their infrastructure. Okay. Point 2 is mandatory transparency.
Currently, these hyperscale facilities operate as massive black boxes. Companies fiercely guard their energy and water consumption data as proprietary trade secrets.
Which is convenient for them.
Very. The report demands the implementation of an AI energy score for models and the aggressive expansion of the EU data center register. We need granular, legally mandated reporting on exactly how much energy and water a specific AI model consumes during both training and daily inference, so consumers, businesses, and regulators can accurately price the true ecological cost.
Makes total sense. Point 3 is arguably my favorite, and it requires a cultural shift. Sufficiency.
Sufficiency is about interrogating the utility of the technology. It means pausing to ask, do we actually need an energy-intensive large language model for this specific application?
Right.
The report advocates for an engineering philosophy that prefers simpler, leaner, targeted models, or even traditional non-AI, rule-based software tools for basic computational tasks.
It's the sledgehammer to crack a nut principle. If I want to search a massive database for a specific term, I don't need a 2 trillion parameter neural network that understands the nuance of 14th century French poetry to do it.
No, you don't.
A basic low-energy search script will do the job perfectly well. We are normalizing the use of the most energy-dense computing architecture ever devised by humanity for absolute trivialities. We have to design systems that default to the lowest energy tool required for the job.
Exactly. Moving to point 4, integration. If we are forced to generate massive amounts of industrial heat through computation, we cannot simply vent that thermal energy into the sky as a waste product.
So what do we do with it?
The report calls for mandates requiring data centers to physically integrate with local municipal infrastructure, specifically district heating networks.
Oh, that's smart.
The waste heat generated by the servers can be captured, piped out, and utilized to heat residential homes, hospitals, and municipal buildings. This turns a polluting waste byproduct into a valuable public utility, offsetting the need for natural gas heating in local communities.
And finally, point 5, updating the legislative frameworks.
The report delivers a stark critique of current regulatory efforts, specifically pointing to landmark legislation like the EU AI Act.
Right.
The analysis notes that current laws are almost entirely anthropocentric. They focus heavily, and rightly so, on protecting human society from algorithmic bias, the spread of deepfake misinformation, copyright infringement, and immediate safety risks.
Which are all very real problems.
They are. However, they completely ignore the massive environmental externalities. The legal frameworks must be urgently updated to explicitly include strict environmental criteria, resource consumption caps, and hardware lifecycle mandates.
Because ultimately, what good is a perfectly unbiased, copyright-compliant AI chatbot if the local power grid has collapsed and the municipal water reservoir is bone dry?
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
The overarching conclusion of the Uco Institute's analysis is not that AI is inherently destructive. The technology holds immense potential to optimize complex systems, accelerate material science, and model climate change mitigation strategies.
It has amazing potential.
But in its current hyper-capitalist iteration, it operates completely without ecological accountability. True, sustainable technological progress cannot be divorced from the physical limits of the planet. Voluntary corporate sustainability reports are insufficient. Only robust regulatory frameworks, mandated transparency, and international coordination can force the market to optimize for the planet, rather than just for quarterly profit margins.
We have covered incredible ground today. We started with the seamless, frictionless illusion of the weightless cloud, the simple magic of typing a prompt into a clean white interface. But we have fundamentally dismantled that illusion to expose the heavy, grinding industrial reality operating beneath the surface.
It's a completely different picture now.
We've explored the sprawling, concrete, hyperscale data centers that rival small cities in size. We've mapped the staggering energy demands that are currently pushing local power grids in places like Virginia and Ireland to the brink of failure. We've exposed the spatial and temporal accounting tricks of the carbon ledger, the terrifying and uninsurable push to revive nuclear fission, the evaporation of hundreds of billions of liters of critical water resources, the intense geopolitical strain on the semiconductor supply chain in Taiwan, and the mountains of toxic e-waste generated by the inescapable logic of the Jevons paradox.
It is, without question, a massive, unprecedented physical footprint for what we largely perceive as an invisible digital product.
It absolutely is. And as you process all of this, the biggest takeaway I want to offer is a shift in perspective. To recognize that physical tether. Every prompt you type, every massive data set you command an algorithm to sort, every whimsical image you generate, it isn't just magic happening in the ether. It is a tangible industrial process that pulls current from a grid, combusts fuel, evaporates water, and consumes rare earth metals.
That's exactly right.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Building on everything we've explored today about the hidden, externalized costs of this technology, imagine if the sleek interface on your phone or your desktop changed tomorrow. Imagine if the true physical cost of an AI query, the exact fraction of a liter of water evaporated from a distant cooling tower, the precise grams of carbon emitted from a local natural gas plant, the microscopic amount of toxic e-waste generated by the wear and tear on the GPU were printed in stark black text at the bottom of your screen, like a physical, itemized grocery receipt every single time you used it. If you saw that environmental receipt instantly materialize in front of you, would you still hit send quite as often? We'll leave you to mull that over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.